Hello, my name is Justin Trapp and I am the Ceramic Studio Manager at IS183 Art School of the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts. And today we are going to go over two types of clay preparation. One is called spiral wedging and the other is called ram's head wedging. And it is a good way to get your clay prepped before you get on the wheel. Is to get air out of your clay, any foreign matter, and to homogenize the platelets in your clay. When you get clay, typically from any sort of mixer or from any distributor, it is usually a really good idea to wedge your clay so you can, get all that foreign matter, that potential foreign matter out of there, or any air bubbles. When we mix our clay here, we do not have a vacuum on the pugger, so it does not get all the air out, and we have to do a really good job to make sure that we don't have any air or foreign matter in the clay. So we're going to start with what is called spiral wedging, and I like to use spiral wedging for larger amounts of clay. This is probably somewhere in the ballpark of maybe 5 or 6 pounds of clay, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, give or take. And I'm going to show you how to wedge this up and get it ready to get on the wheel to throw. All right? So the first thing, you'll notice that this was all apart. And before I start wedging, I'm just going to slap all this clay together. Really use the table. Just make sure that it is all together in a uniform fashion to get ready to wedge. If you were to continue doing this, this would not be an ideal way to get any foreign matter and air bubbles out of the clay. Not to say that some air bubbles and foreign matter might start to come to the surface, but we would really want to make sure that this entire block of clay is free from any air bubbles that can disrupt us when we're on the wheel. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up, and I'm just going to press down and sort of roll it into the table. And this is actually the ram's head style of wedging that I'm showing you first, just as a setup. I did that 2 or 3 times, and you see that's already starting to give me a spiral, right? The idea is to keep a spiral, and it's taking clay from the outside and it's working itself into the inside and then back out, and then just continually doing that to ensure that you get a nice homogeneous clay before you sit down and throw. If you find any foreign bits or dry clay in it, you can just pick that stuff out, set it to the side, and not even bother struggling with that. So you can see that I've started setting this up in a spiral already. I'm going to take a lot of pressure, or most of the pressure, with my my left hand, and I'm going to push it forward, just like that, with my left hand. I'm making sure that I compress things and push them together so they're not splaying out over the table over time, and that is going to keep me in a really good position to keep the spiral up. You'll notice that I'm pressing down, massaging into the table, picking up, turning about 15 degrees, and then repeating that process. This is going to feel pretty weird to you in the very beginning, and does require practice, just like anything else. Once I get it set up, I'm going to minimize those movements. I'm not going to make them as drastic because I want this to go all the way around and in very nicely, incrementally, making sure that all the air bubbles and foreign matter are actually getting out of the clay or coming to the surface so I can pick them out of the clay. So you can see what I've got set up here. On the back end, you should have this bulk of clay that is basically just incrementally rocking back and forth and then getting set up to come into my left hand and be wedged and put together nicely. You'll also start to notice that you're maybe breathing heavily or your arms are getting a little bit tired. This will subside a little bit once you get a little bit more in practice. I still get a little bit out of breath. I mean, it's a physical activity, so, don't be afraid of that. If you're noticing that your arms are getting much more tired faster than you think should be, I would suggest maybe, widening up your stance and now letting your body weight go over the top of that and not pressing so much down with your arms like that, but now rocking yourself back and forth, letting the weight of your body go over the top of the clay while holding your arms sturdily. Now if you get to a point, you're getting good at this, this doesn't feel like, it's a huge effort to you, but you don't know where to go from here, that is what I'm about to show you next. So I can maintain this for, as long as the clay will be moist. I can keep doing this pretty much indefinitely. At some point in time though, I do need to roll this up to make it a more solid piece of clay, more cylindrical, because when I sit down to the wheel, I want to make sure that this is the easiest for me to handle. It's not in some sort of rectangle or square or anything weird, but it is in more of a circular setup or cylindrical setup. What I'm going to do now is lessen the pressure from my left hand pressing down, making this pocket right here, and I'm going to concentrate the pressure down more so with my right hand, bracing with my left hand, and then rolling it into the table to where it is starting to now come together. Instead of leaving this behind here, I'm thinking of basically just wrapping this up into this bulk of clay right here. So you see how that's changing? And a few more turns here, it's going to be all together. Lastly, I'll roll it on the table to smooth it out. Also let it roll in between my hands to smooth out the bottom and the top here. If there's any sort of gaps or anything like that, this is just to smooth it out. I'll even use the table like that to smooth out the bottom. Slap it together to really ensure that I get it to a workable size that's nice for me. And then lastly, I like to take a wire tool and do a cross section to take a look at the work that I have done, to double check myself to see if there's any foreign matter that's left in the clay or if there are any air bubbles that I can see in these cross sections. And there's a little bit of one right here. You can start to see this breaking and expose a little bit of an air pocket, and that's okay. It's not terrible, it's not the most ideal, but I am also thinking about breaking this clay down into smaller chunks or into more manageable sizes. Also thinking about the size of the piece that I want to throw on the wheel is influencing what I'm going to do with this clay next. So I'm going to take just a little bit more off of this guy here that's already been wedged. Set this to the side because now I'm thinking about this. I like to use a spiral wedge, especially if I'm thinking about making cups or smaller bowls, something like this. This is maybe a little over a pound, maybe a pound and a half or so. I've wedged it once spiral wedging, and now I'm going to finish it off with the ram's head wedging. Ram's head wedging is the same general concept of spiral wedging, in that I am looking to eliminate air bubbles. I'm looking to bring any foreign matter out of the clay to the surface that I can pick out. And check that out, I got another spiral going. And the reason why it's called ram's head is because you have these 2 points up here that start to look like a ram's head, and this clay down here, just like the spiral wedging, as you can see, it's going from the outside, working its way in, and then back out again and again and again. So what I'm doing with ram's head is same idea. I'm massaging it into the table. I want to compress the sides together. I'm not, like squeezing the actual life out of it and, trying to force it together, but I'm also not letting it get away from me when I start to massage it into the table. And I want to press down over the top of it, get to a point, and then roll it into the table. I don't want to go all the way down and then splay it out flat over the table and then try to fold it back. That will guarantee that you put air pockets or air bubbles back into the clay. You want to make sure that you have tight lines like this right here. And you want to make sure that we're compressing so that these larger gaps here don't actually become larger and maybe have clay fold over on them and create air pockets. And that is also the reason for the side compression as well. A lot of students may say that they can do this, and then when they get on the wheel they notice that there are air pockets maybe right here and right here, and that comes from not a good compression on the sides, and also the fact that right here is where the concentration of the force is when you're pushing down over the top of it, and it doesn't seem to translate or get to the sides as well as it could. One thing you can do, or one thing that I like to do, is start to rock the clay to one side, altering the pressure. So now I'm putting more pressure into my left palm, which is throwing it lopsided, and now I'm concentrating the wedging more so on the left side versus the right side. And then I'll switch the pressure back over the top of it and then focus on the right side, ensuring that I wedge the entire piece of clay thoroughly. Now I'm focusing back on the center. And then shifting to my right hand to ensure that I get the right side of this piece of clay wedged up very well as I have in the center and the left side. Just like when I was doing spiral wedging, once I feel like I have done this enough times, really feels good, feels homogeneous, there's nothing coming to the surface, I don't hear any air bubbles popping anymore, I have to roll this back up, right? So just like with spiral wedging, I'm going to reduce the pressure that I'm putting down over the top of this. I'm still rolling back and forth, I'm still compressing on the sides, but now my concentration is to make sure that I have less of these lines, and that's why I describe it as massaging into the table, not so much folding over or folding into. Seeing as how I got that to a point, I'm going to start rolling that back and forth. This is going to smooth out my ends as well as compress the center and get everything rolled up nicely together. Again, use the table, smooth out the bottom, do the same thing with the top, roll it around a little bit. And now I have a perfectly wedged piece of clay that I can get ready to go to the wheel and make whatever I like.